Looks like we're getting started. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to STTA here with P Flag. I'm super excited that you're all here. We have a very special, fun, invigorating Pride edition of STTA featuring some of my best friends. But first, we're going to start with my bestest friend. Why don't you come on in, Jean Marie? Let's help us get it started.
Thank you, Janelle. I am so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to do this, something to talk about. So welcome, everybody. My name is Jean Marie Navetta. I'm the Director of Learning and Inclusion at PFLAG National, and this is our weekly conversation, and this is our final session of Pride Month. But as you know, at PFLAG, Pride is 12 months out of the year. We go all year long. But in our official commemoration, we wanted to do something very different. So today we have some incredible guests. One of the biggest features of Pride actually is drag queens. It's one of the most important features at Pride parades. And actually, drag queens have become and always have been a year-round installment in our community, reaching people also outside of the community. So today, we wanted to talk to a couple of amazing queens, not just about how inadequate my makeup is today compared to theirs, but also about drag and race and social change and activism. So with that, I would like to introduce today's guests, Keisha Carr and Ms. Jade. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, good afternoon.
How are you?
Hi, I'm so glad that you were both here. This is such an exciting conversation. And so for everyone who wants to follow along with us, we are going to be using an article that it was in USA Today called Making a Wig and Heels Political, Black Drag Queens Rally Support for Black Lives Matter and Pride. If you want to get that, you can access that article on the Straight for Equality website. And so I want to dive right in so we can start talking. So this whole article is about how many drag performers, particularly Black drag queens, have really gotten into activism. Some of them really inspired by Black Lives Matter, some of them by general LGBTQ activism. And yet, for those people inside the community, you both know this has been happening forever. This is not at all a new development. So talk to me about this. Has it always happened? Who should people know about? And what has it looked like? And either one of you can start. You can just jump in. You're not flag.
I mean, for me, I think doing drag in general is political. You know, taking that stance, like cultivating that art, but also being queer people, just living your life authentically is political. We don't see it very much because we're bombarded with ideas about social norms and how we're supposed to dress and act and jobs we're supposed to inquire. Then you add in that we're Black, you know, people of color. So then there's so many stigmas coming from society, but also within our community. So just the fact that we get to be ourselves and create art and performance, that in and of itself is political and almost a rebellion as to what people tell us what we should be doing.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think that as you said, like doing drag in and of itself is a form of protest. It is a big FU to gender norms. I mean, I'm a drag queen, Black drag queen with a beard. You know what I mean? Like it's a big FU to gender norms and whatnot. And I think we're seeing it more now because we're seeing drag more now, especially with the onset of shows like RuPaul's Drag Race and We're Here. We're seeing just drag enter the mainstream culture. And so I think that's why we're starting to see more drag queens at the front. We've always been there fighting. We've always been there standing up, doing it. But we're seeing it now because it's in the cultural zeitgeist.
And I think that's really exciting. So have you seen, and I just need to ask this question, because of how mainstream in some ways, thanks to RuPaul's Drag Race, which was the entry point for a lot of people who had really never experienced drag, are you seeing more diverse audiences showing up to experience drag shows and drag performances? Are you seeing differences in who's out there?
I mean, yes, but probably not in the way that you would think. I'm starting to see more cisgendered, probably heterosexual women showing up to the shows because that, like you said, RuPaul's Drag Race is their entrance into drag, and they're like, oh, what is this? This is happening out in the real world. Let's go see this live. So I've been seeing a lot of that showing up at my shows. I don't know about Miss Jade, but
I feel I would totally jump on that bandwagon as well. I think there's always been a space in nightlife for like all the weirdos and all the eclectic people and all the like eclectic people to come together and just like watch like things go down in performance. But because drag and nightlife is more mainstream, we're seeing not only maybe a more diverse crowd, we're seeing a bigger crowd. But with those crowds actually come a lot of expectations, because a lot of them are only seeing drag that's been produced for them. So
interesting.
Yeah, so it's like what's televised and what's popular and what gets in tuning in. That's not necessarily what we always do at our drag shows. That's not necessarily what's always been happening in that way.
Oh, how fascinating. So this becomes a sort of a secondary entry point. So maybe Drag Race is the first one, seeing you in person is another one, and that's when they get to experience that drag is more than just what they're sort of seeing on television, that there is a lot more going. What an unbelievable opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
I want to talk, because we definitely want to talk about race. In the article that we started with today, the issue of race and racism, even inside of drag circles, is discussed pretty extensively. And I know that this weekend there was an incident in Chicago which brought a lot of attention to what's going on. I saw the news story before I even talked to Jamel about it. We were saying how interesting that became a piece of mainstream news. So could you both talk to me a little bit about your experiences as Black drag queens in this space? Because a lot of people's exposure, for the most part, was to primarily white drag queens.
Yeah. I think I have a kind of a unique perspective, because I tend to work most often in the Midtown area in Hell's Kitchen in New York City. And it is a primarily pretty white demographic in the bars and whatnot. And there's maybe one other Black drag queen that works in those spaces. And I think it's really sad, because there are so many incredibly talented Black drag queens in this city that are not getting the chances to have those booking fees and do things like that, because they're just being kept out in favor of white queens. And it's just, it really sucks, because the representation isn't there.
So there's still gatekeepers going on, very much, it sounds like, in the community.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Time for reaching.
I mean, I'm sure Ms. Jade probably can speak to that personally.
Ms. Jade, tell me.
Yeah, well, it's layered, because, we think nightlife, we think queer family, we think inclusion. A lot of these people who are running these bars, these managers, these people who oversee, they're not necessarily part of our community. A lot of these people are actually straight white men, usually conservative, who are thinking about it in terms of money and finances. So it's weird, because it's a double-edged sword, because of course we want to showcase our art, and of course we want to perform and be a part of the scene. But it's really interesting that, as you said, there are gatekeepers within the community, some straight, some queer, who kind of have a say about what they want to showcase. And I grew up in Westchester, and I was performing a lot in Manhattan and Brooklyn, so I got to see, like, I've always just felt kind of like tokenized in a way. And when you grow up as a Black drag performer, you're often bombarded with ideas about what you are and are not supposed to do. Like, as a Black drag queen, they want us to do high energy numbers. Of course, we're Black, so we must be able to dance. We gotta dance. We gotta do. And yes, Beyonce. We love Beyonce. So it's really interesting, because even ideas about race and what is kind of applicable or tangible is bombarded on us from our community.
How interesting. So we are sometimes our own gatekeepers, and we, in some ways, because we have not addressed these issues of bias and stereotype, are kind of forcing people to do the same thing over and over again and not necessarily growing, it sounds like. So let me ask you, and this wasn't one of the planned questions, but since you've mentioned it, I've just decided I needed to, which is, what needs to happen to change that? Because there's so much there are so many queens out there who are not white, who are phenomenal and changing the conversation and changing perceptions. What do you think needs to change within the community to make some of these, to create spaces for people?
I think for me, performers should feel comfortable talking about their experiences within the scenes, in addition to our rates that we're getting paid. I've seen many people of color, younger drag performers, and yes, I do sometimes feel like the more advanced you are, more coins, period. But it's really interesting about when you start talking about it, because we're kind of pressured to not talk about these things. Like, don't let people know your budget. Right. Like, that's none of their business. It's between you and I. But what we're actually doing when we put ourselves in those situations is we don't allow other performers to maybe rise up to the occasions and make the same money that we're making. It's really interesting because there's kind of fear and a pressure that's put upon us, but it's an unwritten rule. But I think just talking about our experiences and what we're paid, because these places are first, and then the art, maybe.
Right.
So I just think that's important that we, talked about forming drag unions, which is, of course, is a great idea, but there's always going to be another cheaper and with less experience. And the managers, because they are, a lot of the times, is they will book them no matter what.
And it's interesting because what you're saying, the not talking about it, I used to work in a women's organization, and we always talked about pay and how women needed to share with each other what they were making, but we were all taught not to do that because it's impolite. But it created this culture in which it allowed pay inequity to start existing. Keisha, what are you seeing?
I think a lot of it needs to fall to not only, I'm in a position where the bar managers and owners that I work for allow me a certain amount of power in casting shows and whatnot. And so whenever I have that, I make a point to cast BIPOC queens or trans queens or queens just that aren't from the area, queens from Brooklyn, queens from the Bronx. You know what I mean? I think it's imperative that the queens that do have out use that to promote other people, to give them the platform, because if we're gonna sit and wait on the bar owners to do it, well, that's obviously not going to happen. That hasn't happened yet. They've been owning the bars forever.
Yep.
So if we want our own people to rise up and do better, we have to help them.
It's another case of you're going to have to do it ourselves. And I think, unfortunately, we have seen so many cases of where if it isn't people in the community doing the heavy lift, it's just not going to get done because people don't typically share space. So I want to talk a little bit about how drag has gone to places that, frankly, we never really expected it to go. So both of you have had experiences with drag queen story hours. One of the biggest features in suburban America now is drag brunch for the often white ladies living in the suburbs who suddenly know all the names of the drag queens. So tell me about what your experiences have looked like in these places. Did either of you expect that you'd be participating in spaces like this when you first started doing work? And what potential do you think that drag has to really change people's perceptions about gender and about identity and about expression? Because certainly we're also seeing a lot more diversity, not just in the race of drag queens, but also in the expressions.
100%. I think I personally did not expect to be reading to children. I probably shouldn't be reading to children. I filthy mouth. But I didn't expect to be in those spaces. As far as brunch goes, we were doing drag brunch before it became a popular thing in Serbia, but it has changed. And what I do love about drag brunch now is that it is allowing those people that initially, saw us as maybe clowns or freaks or whatnot, are getting to see that there's an actual person, and that this isn't just a plaything. This is a job. We are here for a purpose. And I love that. I love that is a byproduct of what's been happening.
That's amazing. It's amazing. Ms. Jade, what have you seen?
I've been working with Drag Queen Story Hour And I've read books in schools, libraries, homeless shelters, churches. And I actually grew up really, really religious. I was raised by a Pentecostal minister.
Same.
So I had a lot of like repression when it comes to my sexuality. And when I started coming to terms with that, I still had all these things bombarded to me about social norms. So I remember the first time I was 16, but to me, I was like, oh no, I would never do drag. Oh no, I'm not that gay. I'm not that boy.
Same.
Look at her now. I'm 20 years old. No, just kidding. I'm not 20, but
me too.
So I, grew up religious, got into drag, and when I'm not doing drag, I'm actually a dance teacher. I teach kids and I teach adults. So here I am in my adult career, teaching children and adults, and then doing drag at night. I'm very, very separate. And then I brought these worlds kind of together. And of course, for me, it felt very, very strange. It felt very, very off. But what I find is the youth, even with teaching them, when you teach someone young to like perform and be confident, they're like they have no quarrels about being themselves. Like they will do a sassy jazz walk because they feel it. It's harder for teenagers to do that because they've already felt bombarded with ideas about how they are supposed to be acting, who they are, like what their parents are expecting of them. So for me, whenever I do story hours, I always make a point to remind them that this is a safe space where you can authentically be yourself. And I always tell the parents and the adults there, it's your responsibility to keep that energy going. Allow your kids to experiment, to explore, and be themselves unapologetically so. Because if everyone gave themselves the right to do that, the world would be a better place. We would all be a little bit happier with ourselves. So it actually just took me bringing these worlds together and seeing these smiles and having parents talk to me and kids want to talk to me and they want to touch my hair, they want to touch my jewelry, they want to wear what I'm wearing, and they're not shook, they're not afraid when they see me. They're just like, whoa, this is awesome, I want hair like that, or and I always tell them, if you've ever dressed up for Halloween, you've done drag, honey. It's
Yep.
It's in your Rolodex. You've done it before. I've actually had such an incredible time doing Drag Queen Story Hour and meeting all these incredible, and I just know that the youth are gonna like blow us out of the water with what they're gonna do and how comfortable they're gonna and get it together.
But I have to say, we have these generations of kids coming up and sort of seeing things differently because of what you're doing. You are creating those spaces where they are being told that's okay. I mean, being 26, also, I can remember a time, I'm making this, yeah, you laugh because it's that obvious. But, I remember when I was little, there was nothing like this. There was nobody telling you it was okay what you looked like. It was okay how you felt. No one. And I mean, I think about what a phenomenal opportunity, and especially for kids who don't necessarily fit into the neat binaries or into the more acceptable ways of looking, to have examples like both of you out there actually talking to people and sending these messages especially to adults. So I actually want to see, Jamel, would you like to pop back in with us and join the conversation? Because I know people have been talking and there might be some good questions out there.
Absolutely. So folks are very intrigued. There are some very, very good questions. I want to scroll back up. Leticia had a very good question that the three of us talk about a lot, but could you say more about drag that is not produced for a TV audience? Specifically, since folks are familiar with Drag Race, can you all point out some gaps in how Drag Race portrays drag versus what actually exists in the drag community?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. There's a couple of points that really stick out to me. One, Drag Race has become about what you can acquire and not what you can do. So you're seeing queens go on that show that have spent weeks working with designers to make this outfit. They spent weeks working with a hairstylist to do the wig. And then they show up, put on the face, and walk down the runway. And people think, oh, wow, this queen did this. Well, She did in a way, but generally, when you're going to see queens out in the wild, we're out here doing it ourselves. We're making our own costumes. We're doing our own hair. We've prepared the set list. The entire show is something that we've put together ourselves. So you're watching on Drag Race something that has been produced for your consumption, and then when you come to the bar, you're seeing us produce something for your consumption. So it's a very different situation. Also, drag in nightlife is much more subversive. It's much more challenging. I don't want to say whitewashed, but like maybe homogenized is a word for what's happening on Drag Race. It sucks. You get sweet drag on Drag Race. You don't get people really pushing the envelope and making statements and challenging thought and issues, which happens a lot in drag. It's where it started from.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my two main pieces with it.
I also think about like how like since we're like in the know, like for us, like drag is much more diverse. So when you have bio queens, you have hyper queens, you have trans queens, like there's a variety of presentations. And I think that Drag Race has very much so glamorized, like Jade said earlier, upbeat Black queens that can dance, and then like attractive white guys out of drag. And it's weird because it's like, okay, like, is that a part of the community? Sure, but like, is that drag?
Right.
I'd also like to point out that the judges panel are queen on the panel, and I don't even think they even talk themselves. I think they have to like step themselves into panties, and people they just stand there and they're like a Barbie. So to have a panel of 5 people and only one person does drag, and these 5 people are telling you what drag is and what drag isn't. I know if I were on the show, I would actually be like, well, actually,
right?
So what's happening is we have 4 people who don't do drag, aka what I like to call pedestrians, telling us what drag is and what drag isn't, to the point of like even talking about hairlines. Oh, I could see your hairline in the back. I see that's a boy hair. It's really sharp. If only it was more round, it'd be more feminine. Like just that. It's like I could be okay with anyone telling me what is and what is not applicable for my drag.
Right.
And yeah, so that's just to piggyback on what he just said. There's plenty of other things I could say as well, but I think
plenty.
We'll save that for after hours.
A lot of drag is like creating thought-provoking work, and not necessarily, top 10 pop albums are always thought-provoking work. You're gonna have a lot of artists right now actually putting out work about Black lives and feeling isolated, and it's very emotional. These are things that with drag we're with artists in general, when emotions and feelings, and what we like to do is we like to create art from those emotions. So you're going to get a lot of that stuff happening now. You won't necessarily get that on Drag Race because, again, it's over. Right. They want you to hear the poppy, like Ariana Grande, the Britney Spears, and it's like, oh my God, I love this song, yes. But there's so much more as artists that we have to say besides look at me do this double pirouette and hair whips. There's so much more. There's only slight layer that's entertaining, but also layer of what we can do.
Well, speaking of entertainment, Charity would like to know, what is your signature performance piece and who is your favorite performer? I have some opinions, but I'm going to let y'all answer.
You have opinions. Of course you have opinions. Who is my favorite performer? I will. My favorite performer is Bob the Drag Queen. Bob the Drag Queen is my favorite performer. Such a smart, thought-provoking drag artist, high energy when she wants to, and I love Bob. I love Bob to death. My signature performance piece is probably a number that I do called "Read My Lips." That's what I do. I'm a lip syncer, like spoken word, and so this is like a 7.5 minute spoken word number that I do that people seem to really enjoy. So that's
phenomenal. Look at the material.
Right?
Two performances that I can't pick from. I love, I base a lot of my drag off of Black women, Eartha Kitt, Janet Jackson, Tina Turner. Those are icons. So Janet Jackson's Control is one of my favorite numbers to perform. But because I grew up kind of religious, to give a little tongue-in-cheek energy, there's a song called The Loophole. It's a comedy song by a duo called Garfunkel and Oates. It's basically, I'm hoping it's basically this, but it's about good Christian girls finding other ways to boyfriends that so they don't lose their virginity. So it's so those are
tale as old as time. Tale as old as time.
and then that's probably a little bit of me growing up religious and kind of a big FU to making fun of it. I like to make fun of myself and my experiences. So I'll take it there. Yeah.
We got about 4 minutes left, but I think this next question is really important. So I want to get it out there. It's another question from Charity, and she says, how can we as fans and allies help draw attention to the drag community, especially the Black drag community?
This is hard because, I've even seen people through social media not really feature or or follow people because they're Black drag queens. So as quickly as we are to go follow these white drag performers, usually skinny, white, tall, cis men, their Instagram count flies up, but there's so many incredible, talented Black, all over gender spectrum performers, and I think even just following them and staying the knowing, supporting these artists and giving them kind of your full attention and your coins. I feel I've worked with so many awesome white artists, but they always have kind of a gaggle of queers who are obsessed and worship, and sometimes they're just doing the bare minimum, in my opinion. Performers, as allies, as advocates, I'm they're just maybe interesting, maybe cute, maybe attractive, maybe a little political, but they're not necessarily using their voice in the way they could, or their art in the way they could, but it's just enough that's people who are kind of sounds terrible, but just liberals who are kind of passive about it, who are they just feel kind of content with the minimum of everything, including their activism and allyship.
Yeah, I would say the easiest thing that you can do is follow these Black queens on social media, because a lot of opportunities and gigs are happening based upon the following that they have. So these queens I get more opportunities because of my following. I know that for a fact, and I know that I wasn't getting opportunities when my following wasn't as high. So I'm saying, please, if you have Black drag queens or BIPOC drag queens that you love, or drag kings, follow them, like their content, because that is, people are booking people based on their following.
Mm-hmm. And share their content as well. Do shout outs. There's magazines who are featuring non-Black artists all the time, so to be, again, being a Black drag queen is political, and sometimes magazines or people with or organizations don't want to feature them. That might be a little bit more palpable.
Yeah.
All right, we got about a minute-ish left, Jean Marie.
Well, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank you, Jamel, for helping me pull this all together. Ms. Jade and Keisha, you were amazing and made it the best final show of Pride Month I think that we'll ever be able to do. So thank you so much for everything. Continue being you, because you are changing the face of drag. You're changing the face of the whole community, and I'm so grateful to you. So thank you so much to both of you, and thanks so much, Jamel.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having us. Appreciate it so much. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Well, this is the end of Pride Month, almost, but we still have a few more days to go. I want to quickly make a mention of earlier this week, PFLAG launched a new campaign called #YouAreMyPride. It's a gorgeous video if you haven't seen it, created in partnership with our friends at Wear Your Voice, uplifting BIPOC stories and storytellers, including many PFLAG families. You'll see a lot of faces that look familiar. Check it up at pflagnation.al/YAMP. You are my pride. I want to thank our guests today, Ms. Keisha and Ms. Jade, and thank Jamel again for helping make our really good idea actually come true. And just a reminder, please follow Drag Queens of Color on social media and put your money where your mouth is. Leave money in tip jars. Pay for experiences, and make sure that you are supporting the community. We can make things change with where we spend our money and where we give attention. So share your space. So this is the end of our show for the day. Thank you so, so much. We'll be back again next Thursday to do this again. So as we always close out, run fast, laugh hard, and most of all, be kind. I'm Jean Marie Navetta. Learn more about PFLAG at pflag.org. Thanks.